This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Morning, Michael. You've got a pep in your voice. You've got a lot of confidence this morning. I can feel it.
Well, coming off last week's glorious win.
And the week before, I believe.
Oh, look, I don't count really, Sean.
Oh, no. Go for the hat trick.
Every week is a new week as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Because our weekend show is obviously very different to our weekday show. There's no competition through the weekday shows. That's I suppose occasionally a little bit of competition creeps in. But the weekend show is very different. Here we are nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week. Each of us pick one, and we each pick a most remarkable story and a sleeper story and our favourite story. And of course, because it is a competition and there needs to be a winner, we need an adjudicator who is capable of kind of telling you, Sean, why your stories were not as good as mine. And that adjudicator is our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang. Adam, good morning.
Good morning, Michael.
There's a lot of fear and greed in this show. I fear that Adam will go for you. You're greedy, Michael. You know,
this show embodies.
Does. Everything bad about the human nature, fear and greed, we got it.
Now, we say all of this, and then I will just make one minor point. Last week, we made an exception, and we're going to do the same exception this week, that the biggest story this week is not going to be part of the competition.
Oh, look at Adam. Adam, you're upset about this, aren't you?
I am a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Adam likes everything to be able to be kind of put into the spreadsheet and kind of tallied up.
It suddenly becomes out of 75, not out of 100, which really stuffs up the spreadsheet.
Yeah, but in this particular occasion, it is important to not have competition on the biggest story, because the biggest story involves what is turning into a fairly significant humanitarian crisis as well. So, shall we jump into the biggest story and I might go first because that is the story that I am covering. That is the situation in the Middle East, which is, as I mentioned, getting pretty dire now. It's changing by the day. It's changing by the hour, really. There were some very significant developments this week. There was a devastating explosion at a hospital in Gaza that reportedly killed hundreds. Hamas blamed an Israeli airstrike, while Israel released intelligence showing that it was a failed Palestinian rocket. But it certainly made a terrible situation even worse. We had US President Joe Biden visiting Israel to show support for the country. He had to cut his trip short. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak also visited. Now, the US has an increasing military presence in the area, shooting down missiles over the Red Sea, and it has warned its citizens around the world to exercise caution because of what they describe as the risk of terror attacks and violence, basically as a result of this situation developing in the Middle East. It is a major political crisis, of course. It is also a humanitarian crisis. Some of the images coming out of the region are just shocking, really terrible. Of course, there is a major impact as well then on global financial markets, with some big losses recorded on equity markets. With all of the uncertainty, Sean, as you were explaining to us through the week, we see a lot of investors heading to bonds. Oil prices remain elevated, as you might expect, with the crisis playing out in the Middle East, a major oil-producing region. Locally, there is political tension here in Australia over support for Israel, a perceived lack of support for Palestinians affected by the conflict. Efforts have been underway to get Australians out of Israel. Foreign Minister Penny Wong has said that the security situation is making it very difficult to have any more flights. This is a major story, and really I've only just covered part of it. There's a lot of kind of detail here, and it gets very kind of nuanced in terms of the politics of it all, but just those images that come out of the Middle East, the humanitarian reality of this situation is really, really very confronting.
From both sides, Michael, from both sides.
Absolutely.
It is horrendous.
Yeah.
So this isn't a competition. Look, my biggest local story is the economy. This week we had the minutes of the Reserve Bank board meeting. We had the Reserve Bank Governor, Michelle Bullock, giving her first speech in that role. We had the unemployment rate falling from 3.7% to 3.6%. We had a spike in oil prices and bond yields, as you mentioned, Michael. And this all ahead of next week's crucial central bank board meeting on interest rates. So where do we stand as we are today? Bullock said we have a narrow path to land this economy. Basically, that means slowing it down, and really she's talking about getting inflation lower without triggering a recession. The fact that the labour market is so strong still is the saving grace at the moment. Though economics isn't known as a dismal science for no reason. There's always a double-edged sword in that. So the strong labour market means there's also pressure on prices. which keeps pressure on rates. Bullock also said she's surprised at how resilient the housing market's been. Prices didn't fall as much as she expected last year, and they've picked up faster than forecast. Of course, the Middle East crisis has pushed up oil prices. That'll slow growth and local growth. There just seems to be so many unknowns at the moment around the economy. The chief one is what's happening to prices. That is by far the critical data point. We'll find out more about that on Wednesday, at least locally, with the September quarter CPI coming out. Very difficult to know where we're going, what that means for equity markets, for bond markets, for jobs. It's just massive at the moment, what's going on in the economy, quite apart from what's happening in the Middle East. Adam, try and judge those two.
Yeah, well, thank you for not making me do that, because I can't. The humanitarian crisis between the Ukraine and Russia, Israel and Gaza, the northern hemisphere on that continent, it's so disrupted. In terms of the interest rate path ahead, I'm fascinated by Michelle Bullock. I think
I'm sure she'll be pleased to hear that.
One of her KPIs. What does Fear and Greed think?
I know Michelle Bullock a little bit. No, I mean, that's not fair to say. Years ago, I knew Michelle Bullock a little bit because I worked at the Reserve Bank. She is such a lovely person, Adam.
She strikes me that way.
Oh, no, like she's genuinely warm person.
Yeah.
And I reckon she'd be one of the few people in the world that would actually listen to you. Like, I want to tell you about economics. I've got a spreadsheet here. And I reckon Michelle Bullock would be the type of person saying, Adam, I've got a spare hour whilst I'm running the economy.
Can I just say, Adam, I think in the history of the Fear and Greed Weekend Edition, that is the most savage comment.
What a sledge. Brilliant.
Ever used.
I get points for that, don't
I reckon you do, actually.
Yeah.
Because it was that good. But this is one of the few times, Sean, that you've turned the judgment on me in such a way. Well done.
Oh, thank you. I'm proud of that.
Oh.
Better get on, I reckon.
Oh, goodness me. All right, let's get into the most remarkable story. Okay. And here's where the competition really heats up. Sean, would you like to go first on this one?
Sure. Mine's actually quite short because it is that remarkable.
Oh.
It is remarkable how many people voted no in the voice referendum. It wasn't even halfway close. It was an absolute shellacking. Now, there's a word, isn't it? Shellacking, a smashing. About 40% voted yes after months of campaigning, about $450 million in spend, and the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, giving it everything. So too did the Greens, so too did Labor. In Queensland, nearly 70% of voters said no. In Victoria, arguably the most leftist state in the colony, only 45% said yes. Not one state voted yes. One territory did, the ACT, but what a shellacking. So big a loss, it's actually truly remarkable. I'm still getting my head around the fact that so few people supported it. How could Albanese and Labor get it so wrong? Clearly they didn't make the case for change, but still. Now, since then, the coalition have been somewhat gleeful, pushing Labor on the failure in question time. I think that's a real shame too. The referendum, the vote last weekend, is just remarkable. I actually don't have a lot more to say than that.
Well, okay, so you said the word remarkable 4 times and the word shellacking 8 times.
But hold on, shellacking deserves a good run, though, don't you reckon?
Yeah, shellacking does deserve a run. That is a solid word. I reckon you deserve kind of half a point just for the use of shellacking. But half a point is all you deserve because that is not the most remarkable story of the week. I had a victory last week in this category. I'd like you to invite you to cast your mind back to that remarkable victory. It was a particularly sweet victory because it really, Adam, got under Sean's skin, didn't it? He's mentioned it 3 times since then during our regular daily Fear and Greed show. So you know that it got to
a few times off air as well.
Oh yeah. It's like an iceberg, really. What you hear on air is just a fraction of what the true reality is. But I think we can all agree, with kind of 2020 hindsight, it was the right decision.
Ha! Ha!
Huh. It appears your microphone's malfunctioning there, Sean. It sounds like you're laughing. It feels like you should be agreeing here. I talked last week about the ACCC giving the green light for the $18.7 billion sale of Origin Energy. If we thought that was remarkable, and we all did, it was unanimous,
Well, I'm not so sure about that, but go on.
I mean, unanimous between two of us, right? And so, which it's just kind of a new definition of unanimous, but it was a 2/3 unanimous decision. And we thought that was remarkable. But hold on to your hats, because this week was a massive week for deals.
Deals, plural.
Deals, plural. Last week was just one deal.
Last week was one deal. So we've got deals. We've got a bunch of stories coming up. Excellent. Go
I
ahead.
won last week with one deal. This week, I got three. So, and I'm just going to do them much, much faster as well. Certainly faster than that preamble. So Newcrest shareholders have overwhelmingly voted in favor of a $26.2 billion merger with US gold mining giant Newmont. So Newcrest is going to delist from the ASX this coming Thursday. That is big, with a capital B, a capital I, and a capital G, actually, because that is a big, big deal. Then we have Whitehaven Coal agreeing to pay more than $5 billion for BHP's 2 coking coal mines. Now, this is an interesting one, Adam, and I'm sure you'll be writing this down. Just please pick up your pen, because it suggests that coking coal for steelmaking has a longer future than thermal coal for energy production, and it shows that Whitehaven Coal is clearly thinking long-term here about what the focus of that business is. So, fascinating one. But another potential deal, and this one is one that I suspect, Adam, you might be a little bit interested in, is, of course, the somewhat surprise bid by media company ARN to buy rival Southern Cross Media, Southern Cross Stereo.
What a suck-up to Adam, who used to run radio stations. Go on.
This one is much smaller than the others in terms of value, but if it goes ahead, it will have a disproportionately huge impact on the media, on the entire media landscape in this country. We are talking about the owner of radio stations KISS and Gold trying to buy the owner of Triple M and the Today Network, along with very large digital audio asset and regional assets involving TV, etc. Big personalities involved with all of this. You've got Kyle and Jackie O, who are in line for a $200 million 10-year deal, the largest talent deal ever seen in Australian media, in TV, anywhere. It is huge. Put it all together. Put all of this together. It has been
stories. Together.
Put all of those three components of one single story together, and it has been an absolutely remarkable week for deals in this country. A week that will forever change everything. I'm like,
you could see your face. You're like, what's the word?
No, it was everything.
Everything.
I got to that point. I'm like, don't overreach here, Michael. Don't go too far.
Yeah.
Just say everything. That'll cover it.
Yeah. That's not an overreach.
Adam.
Okay, I'm going to be really quick on this one. Michael, you can't do a box lot story. We said you can't do an Aylmer.
Says when?
The joy. Go on, Adam.
Sean,
wonderful judging. Continue.
Sean, mute yourself for a moment. When did we say this? Tim Burrows said it while Sean was away, but Tim Burrows is not here right now. Adam Lang is. If you're introducing new criteria right now, I am lodging an appeal.
No, I'm keeping the flame alive on the criteria, Michael. So following the Joseph intervention, where, you're not allowed to say the economy is the biggest story, Sean honed in on interest rates and inflation in the biggest story. I think too, though, for your deals, you have to choose one deal, not a box lot of deals.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
I think I'm being consistent with the Joseph intervention.
Yeah.
You're being consistent with this BS approach to judging that you've been taking for some time now.
Oh, hasn't the worm turned, as the two Ronnies might say? Go on.
One story later, the worm has turned.
If I have to pick one, may I tell you which one? I'm going to nominate the media one.
It's just not big enough in scale then.
Oh, well, I'm going to nominate the Newcrest one. $26.2 billion merger.
Can you be quiet and let Adam judge, Michael?
Sorry. Please go on, Adam.
So for me, it is remarkable. I'm not making comment on the yes and the no vote, but what I would observe is so remarkable about it, and I think this is your point, Sean, was that in the polling earlier on, it was 60% were in favour.
Yeah.
And through the campaigning, it turned to 60% no. And I think that really is remarkable.
Yes. That's exactly like behind the words of what I was saying. That's it.
If I look through the words.
That's right. Look through between the words. That's exactly what I was saying.
So I have to give you the most remarkable story this week.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, we are going to a break. I'm just going to regather kind of. I'm reeling from the collusion that's happening here between one contestant and the judge.
We do have our arms around each other, I do agree, but that doesn't mean anything.
It's a professional embrace. Look, we will come back in a moment and find a sleeper story of the week, and you watch the underdog mount an extraordinary comeback. All right, Sean, we're looking for a sleeper story now. So a sleeper story is, of course, a story that's not getting the attention that we feel it deserves or that is going to become a bigger story further down the track. And I'm going to jump straight into this one, if that's okay. Cybersecurity. Now,
what is it? You better explain that. I haven't heard that one before.
Cybersecurity, Sean, is one of the biggest challenges facing Australian businesses right now. And I'm not suggesting, despite your mocking tone, that cybersecurity is a sleeper story. I believe, just from memory, I'm a little ashamed to admit this, that I have attempted that before. It did not work.
No.
What I am suggesting is a sleeper story, though, is the answer that all Aussie businesses have been praying for their cyber risk woes was quietly launched this week by the Commonwealth Bank and by NAB. It's an identity checking service called Connect ID, and it charges companies a fee basically to validate the credentials of customers. So what does this mean? Why is this so significant? It means that all of those other companies, all those other businesses that could be small businesses, right? They no longer have to collect all that data themselves. They no longer have to worry about having licenses and passports and addresses and, Medicare details, all that kind of thing on file, and deal with the risk of that data being breached, like happened to, say, Optus, for instance. This could be, no, not could, this will be an absolute game changer in Australia. And all melodrama aside, it will surely actually come as a big relief to those boards and executives having sleepless nights about data security. Plus, it could actually be a nice little earner for the banks as well. It is a cracker of a sleeper story because of the impact that it can have on businesses of all sizes. And particularly, I'm thinking about small businesses here who would be worried about the risk that they are putting themselves at because of the increased number of cyber attacks. It is such a good sleeper story that I'm actually quite proud to have
worked it out.
Not worked it out, but gotten in first with it. Because I suspect, Sean, that if I hadn't, you would have been all over this one.
What I do like about this story is the idea that Aussie businesses are praying. Like it's just a big bunch of businesses on their knees praying.
Well, you know what? I'm not even going to engage with you anymore. I'm just going to let Adam do the right thing and decide on the winner.
That is a great sleeper story. I'll give you that. If it wasn't for my story, I would like that story, number one. Now, my story's been bubbling along for a while. This week, it hit boiling point. Oh, hold on. If you bubble along, are you at boiling point already?
I think you can't really bubble without boiling, yeah.
So it boiled even more this week. The government has asked for comment on its closing loopholes bill, which in part expands labour laws such that contractors can end up in employee-like arrangements, sort of minimum terms and conditions. We've been talking about it for a while, right? What happened this week is that we started to see the cost of some of these changes and what it means for the economy if they go through. Uber, for example, warned that the price of having a meal delivered from its app could rise by 85%. Rideshare trips, if it was costing you $10, it's going to start costing you $16 if this legislation goes through, according to Uber. DoorDash said the sky is effectively the limit under the new bill. The big miners are up in arms about the cost of contractors. It will add hundreds of millions of dollars to their costs. Now, the government's determined to push this bill through, and so too is the union movement. But what will it cost the economy? Until this week, no one really had put any numbers on it. I'm sure there's a bit of hyperbole around the place on this, but still to actually have those numbers, and this is something that affects the whole economy. So we're not just talking about the cybersecurity, the small business. We're talking about, in fact, this will have a massive impact on small businesses because obviously, two of my kids are employed as contractors effectively at local shops who, employ them for their 10 hours a week or whatever. All those businesses are going to get caught up by this. So it's kind of the massive ramifications, and we kind of got an idea of the cost on that this week. A real sleeper story. Adam, over to you.
Okay, my criteria. Topicality, timeliness, economic impact, subjective bias, and melodrama. Sean, you can't quite match Michael for melodrama, I'm afraid. But I cannot separate them. Connect ID, I think, is a fabulous idea, and that they've kept it under wraps and unveiled it. I think it's awesome because, let's just hope it can work. I think the protection of our digital data is just so vital, particularly with financial records, of course. And the sleeper story, this has huge impact. These are enormous changes. And so I think it is both of them are terrific sleeper stories.
Excellent. Just a little insight there. We obviously do our scripts, 24 hours beforehand, and we start stealing stories. I was all over the Connect ID story. I thought, that's mine. I looked on the script. Michael said, it's mine.
Stolen.
Gazumped.
Let's move on.
Yeah. No, look, I've moved on. If you look over at my notes right now, you will see that during your judgment, all I have written is one large word on it, and that word, and I've underlined it 5 times, injustice. This is outrageous.
No, I can see a certain picture I think you've drawn of me, Michael. It's not very appealing.
It is not very flattering, and I'm sorry.
No.
You shouldn't have to look at that. I'm sorry. I was just doodling. Okay, favourite story. Sean, you go first.
The Power of Tay-Tay.
Oh.
Taylor Swift's Eras is easily the biggest concert film opening ever. Now, it made about $95 million in its first weekend in North American theatres, right? It cost about $15 million to make. And, Michael, as you pointed out at the time, when it was made, there was a strike on, obviously an actor's strike and a writer's strike. Tay-Tay just actually agreed to the union's demands and so could get a workforce to do this film. Cost $15 million, $95 million in the first weekend. Any traditional marketing? She just communicated directly with her 350 million social media followers. I remember Pink toured Australia years ago. And that was a really big thing for newspapers because, of course, lots of advertising for the Pink Tour. Didn't place one ad in the Sydney Morning Herald or The Age. Didn't need to. She'd gone out to her fan base. Forget traditional media, forget billboards, TV ads, radio adverts. Certainly podcast advertising works. Just like to add that. But the point of this story, why I love this story, right? It's just this influencer power has totally changed the economics of the world. And so I went and thought, well, who are the biggest influencers as per followings on Instagram, Facebook, and X? Now, according to Search Engine Journal, number 1, Cristiano Ronaldo, 2, Lionel Messi, footballers, Selena Gomez, 3, Justin Bieber, Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian, personal favourite, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, then Tay-Tay, Katy Perry, and Ariana Grande. I just think it's quite amazing how these 10 people effectively have changed how the world economy works. That's my favourite story, Tay-Tay's huge concert film Eras. Michael.
Good one. That is actually a good story.
Go on.
My favourite story this week, if there's an airline story covered during the week, you can pretty much guarantee it's going to get a run as my favourite story on the weekend edition. But this one takes it to a whole new level of odd, I would say. It was the CEO of Air Asia, and he posted a photo of himself on LinkedIn this week, shirtless, getting a massage at a conference table while he was running a conference call for work. Now, he claimed that a female colleague had suggested it after a somewhat stressful week. There's just so much wrong with this. I don't actually know where to start. So number 1, what on earth was going through his mind when he thought, I'm going to take my top off for this? Like in the office. And then take a photo.
Oh.
And then why post it to LinkedIn? Number 1, it's a professional networking site. It's not really the place for shirtless selfies. That's Instagram. And just because you're doing it on a conference call doesn't make it okay and doesn't make it work-related enough to actually fit into the LinkedIn criteria. And then, on top of all of that, why would you try to justify it by saying that you've just endured an 18-hour flight and you're in pain and you need a massage? What kind of an ad for your airline is that? Fly with us and you'll be so uncomfortable that you'll need a massage when you get to the other end. He did delete the photo, to be fair, and he said that he didn't mean to offend anyone, which is kind of funny. But even with all of that in mind, I think if we were to rank, I suppose you'd say, egregious online activity involving CEOs, he's still not at the top, right? The leader on that front is still the former
I know
CEO
where you're going here. Yes.
of Lark Distilling, Jeff Bainbridge. Now, he was also shirtless, so clearly that must be part of the criteria for this. That was in a video that surfaced online with the added element of an alleged ice pipe in this video and some very, very, very colourful language in that video as well, and a huge scandal, allegations of extortion and all of this. Anyway, that was more than 18 months ago now. But I've got to say, even with old mate linked in with his shirt off, Lark Distilling is going to take some beating, isn't it?
No, it will.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my favourite story. Adam, what do you reckon?
Okay, look, I have avoided looking at that image of the CEO of AirAsia and his shirtless massage in a management meeting. It's just so astounding to me.
Oof.
But I'm sorry, it can't be my favourite story. It's just so ghastly. So I have to give this one to Sean. And the power of Tay-Tay, it's incredible what she has achieved. And you look at how different people are industrialising their brands. Ryan Reynolds, incredible, from gin to a football club to his acting and just so broad. Rihanna, pop star, got, perfumes and fashion lines. Just incredible. So I think the power of Tay-Tay has to win favourite story of the week for me.
Well, this is not the result I was expecting.
We don't even need the score at this point.
Give us so overall, we ended up with. Look, I am going to claim the sleeper story because that was a disaster. So it was 2.5 to 0.5.
We'll both get half a point because that'll make Michael 1. So 3-1.
Okay, 3-1. Yeah, and what was the scores then? The story scores.
Okay, so Sean comes in at 67 out of 75. And Michael, 63.
Shellacking. An absolute shellacking.
It was. All right.
The glee in Sean's voice.
Yeah, there's too much glee. Thank you, Adam. Thank you. That's all I can say. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you, Sean.
Ha ha. Thanks, Michael. Ha ha ha.
So mature. What a way to finish today.
What's worse than a bad loser? A bad winner.
Yes, that is absolutely true. I'm learning a lot about sportsmanship through this podcast, and not necessarily through good examples. All right, make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great weekend.